How does a ferry vanish in half an hour? On a rough night in 1994, the Estonia crosses the Baltic from Tallinn to Stockholm with hundreds of people on board. Only 137 will survive. Shortly after 1 in the morning, heavy blows slam into the bow. Minutes later, the ship begins to list as the angle slowly grows. Within half an hour, the Estonia will roll onto her side and sink. Investigators will blame a failed bow visor and an open ramp. Decades later, new dives will still ask what really happened beneath those waves. This is the story of the Estonia. September 27th, 1994. Evening in Tallinn. At the quay, a Ro-Ro ferry prepares for her overnight crossing to Stockholm. She's a 15-deck car and passenger ferry built in 1980 with a bow visor and ramp that swing up to seal the car deck from the sea. On this night, 989 people are on board, hundreds of passengers in cabins and lounges, and the crew spread between engine room, hotel services, and the bridge. For many, this is a familiar route, a cheap shopping trip to Sweden, a routine crossing on a busy line. Out in the Baltic, the weather is rough. Westerly winds over gale force, waves of 4 to 6 meters rolling across the ship's path. Not unusual for the season, not enough on paper to threaten a modern ferry. Shortly before midnight, the Estonia clears the Estonian coast and heads out into deeper water, steering west-northwest toward the Swedish island of Uto. Inside, passengers move between bar, restaurant, and cabins as the ship begins to pitch and roll. Glasses rattle, chairs slide slightly on the deck. Some will remember hearing heavy bangs from the bow as the hull comes down into the troughs. Above them, on the car deck, rows of vehicles sit secured behind the closed ramp and the heavy bow visor, steel doors that are supposed to keep the Baltic out. It is just after 1 in the morning when those doors begin to fail. After 1 in the morning, the Estonia is deep in the Baltic, driving into gale force westerly winds and 4 to 6 meter seas. Behind the bow ramp, cars and trucks stand in tight lines on the vehicle deck. Outside, each wave hits the visor with a heavy blow. Passengers in forward cabins begin to notice loud bangs from the bow, metallic crashes, a shudder through the hull. On the bridge, the officers feel it too, but at first, the sounds are treated as normal for rough weather. Then the character of the noise changes. The blows grow sharper, more violent, as if something at the front of the ship is tearing free. At the bow, the locking devices of the visor are reaching their limits. With each rise and fall, the visor's weight pulls against hinges and latches. Around 1:15, the visor fails. It tears away from the bow. The ramp behind it, the last barrier between sea and car deck, is forced partly open. Water drives straight into the vehicle space. On a Ro-Ro ferry, the car deck is a long open hall high above the keel. As water spreads from side to side, stability falls. The Estonia begins to heel to starboard. At first, the list is slight, then it grows. People feel the floor tilt, loose objects slide. On the bridge, speed is reduced, courses are tried. A mayday goes out on VHF. Replies from other ships come in, asking for position and details. Answers from the Estonia are fragmentary. Water now lies deep along the starboard side of the car deck. The engines still turn, but the ship is slipping toward a state she will not recover from. From 120 onward, the Estonia is falling over. The list to starboard grows past 15 degrees, then 20, then more. On passenger decks, the change is sudden and physical. Floors tilt, loose furniture slides to the low side. In cabins, people are thrown against walls as they try to stand. Some step into corridors that already feel like ramps. On the car deck, water lies deep along the starboard side, slamming from bulkhead to bulkhead as the ship moves. Every ton pulls the center of gravity further out from under her. The crew try to slow and turn, but control is slipping away. The Estonia answers the helm less and less. The bow rises, the stern digs in, the list keeps increasing. Power fades on some decks. Lights flicker, then go out. Emergency lamps come on in narrow strips, leaving long spaces in shadow. People fight their way uphill, along passageways, toward outer doors and stairwells. Others never make it out of their cabins. Behind each closed door, the angle grows steeper. On the open decks, the slope is now so great that standing is almost impossible. Some life rafts are released, but the ship's heel makes many boats unusable. As the ferry rolls, people slide across wet metal toward the rail and the black water below. Within about half an hour of the first serious list, the Estonia reaches her limit. The starboard side is almost down in the sea. The hull rolls further, exposing her port flank to the sky. Then, in the dark and the wind, the ferry lies on her side and begins to sink. The sea closes over the decks, lights vanish. Within minutes, only scattered life rafts and a few upturned hull shapes remain on the surface of the Baltic. For most of those who were on board, the crossing ends here, in cold water, in darkness, between the last calls for help and the first distant searchlights. When the Estonia disappears, the Baltic is still dark. On VHF, fragments of a mayday mix with routine traffic. Other ferries and cargo ships begin to turn toward the last reported position. Coast guards in Sweden and Finland launch helicopters and patrol vessels into the night. The first rescuers arrive to find scattered life rafts, upturned hulls, and people in the water. The air temperature is close to freezing. The sea is about 10 degrees Celsius. In water that cold, survival time is measured in minutes. Some are pulled from rafts and overturned boats. Others are winched directly from the sea. Most of those still alive are badly chilled, unable to stand or speak. By the time the search is scaled back, 852 people are dead or missing. Only 137 survive. In the months that follow, Estonia, Finland, and Sweden form a joint accident investigation commission. Divers visit the wreck on the seabed and film the torn bow area. Metallurgists study broken hinges and locks from the visor. In 1997, the commission publishes its final report. It concludes that the bow visor's locking devices failed in heavy seas. The visor detached, the ramp was forced open, and water on the car deck led to a rapid loss of stability and capsize. The wreck is declared a burial site. Plans to raise the hull are abandoned. An international agreement is signed to protect the area from disturbance. Officially, the story of the Estonia ends with a failed visor, an open ramp, and a ro-ro ferry lying on her side on the floor of the Baltic Sea. Some disasters are a single obvious moment, an explosion on a runway, a plume of smoke over a city. The Estonia was not. For most of that night, it was an ordinary crossing, a car and passenger ferry following a familiar route between Tallinn and Stockholm. A rough sea, but not an exceptional one. Passengers in cabins and lounges expecting to wake to breakfast and the Swedish coast. Then, within minutes, the sounds at the bow changed. A visor failed, a ramp opened. Water reached a deck that was never meant to flood. The hull did not break apart in midair. There was no fire, no explosion. Engines continued to run, lights stayed on for a time, and yet the ship rolled past the point where her own design could save her. In the years that followed, the Estonia forced ferry operators and regulators to look hard at ro-ro stability. Bow visors were strengthened or redesigned. Ramps and doors were reinforced. Loading and evacuation procedures were revised. The vulnerability of a long, open car deck became something no one in the industry could ignore. The questions did not stop with the report. Later dives and new surveys found hull damage and details that some believed the original investigation never fully resolved. For families of the dead, the wreck on the seabed is both a grave and a place of unfinished answers. Today, the surface of the Baltic above the Estonia is empty. Ships pass along the same route without knowing exactly where she lies. On land, a few memorials carry the names of those who did not return. In offices and training rooms, her story lives on in diagrams, procedures, and case studies about what a single structural weakness can become in heavy seas. Between a normal night on a busy ferry route and a line of names cut into stone, there remains a narrow, fragile space. Where steel meets water, systems reach their limits, and small failures gather into something no one on board can control. Between what was and what remains, there lies the liminal,